Hello, everybody. Welcome to this snowy spring day that we're having. My name is Beth, and I'm the Development Director for the Trails and Open Space Coalition. And on behalf of our entire staff, I want to welcome you to our first public trail mixer. Tonight, we're going to be exploring and talking about e-bikes on our trails. So many of you are familiar with the Trails and Open Space Coalition, otherwise known as TOSC. But for those of you that are unaware of who we are your local nonprofit and your nonprofit organization that advocates for open spaces and trails. More specifically, we advocate for the creation and conservation of an interconnected network of trails, parks, and open spaces. We also advocate for safe trails and parks, and that often includes education efforts aimed at trail sustainability and stewardship, environmental conservation, and reducing user conflicts, which is why when we heard that the Parks Department was going to be introducing a pilot program for e-bikes on more of our trails, we wanted to host this forum to answer some of our questions and a lot of the questions that you might have tonight. So we hope you will find this informative. So for those of you new to TOSC, I will let you know that we have a small but mighty staff. And I did want to take 1 minute just to introduce everybody because they're all here on this call tonight. So if we could pull up everyone that's on staff, I'd love to introduce everybody. The first I saw up was Susan Davies. She is our executive director. She's been with the organization, Susan, for over 10 years. She handles and leads us all in all of the advocacy efforts and is our fearless leader. Next, we have Cherie. Cherie is our office manager. She keeps us all in line, and you all probably know her best because she is the creator of the amazing weekly e-newsletter that we send out that has information galore. Next, we have Alan. Alan is titled Man Behind the Curtain. He's the one that is managing all of this to make sure it is all going seamlessly. He is also our community engagement manager, and he is really our primary advocate for anything urban related, our urban trails and our urban parks, guru with that. We have Aaron on. He's our program coordinator. He does a lot, but his biggest tasks are managing our stewardship programs. He kicked off a new trail ambassador program this year, so hopefully you'll see some trail ambassadors out there this year. And he also helps all of our friends groups do their amazing work. And last but not least, we have Mike, the map guy, otherwise known as the GIS specialist, but he creates all of our maps. And he also is our Ring the Peak leader. He's the one managing that entire project to complete that Ring the Peak trail. So that's our team, and we will pull them all back up at the very end where we'll have some Q&A. But while we're getting ready, as I mentioned, TOSC is a nonprofit organization, and we do not receive any financial assistance from the government. So all of our advocacy and stewardship efforts are funded by our members and small businesses locally, and some grants. So if you are looking for a way to do your part in supporting our trails and open spaces and parks, we urge you to look at becoming a member if you're not already. Join the coalition. It's as easy as going to our website, which is trailsandopenspaces.org, and just click join the coalition. And to sweeten the pot, our event sponsor tonight, Cerberus, will be donating a pint of beer to anybody that becomes a member in the next 24 hours from this session tonight. So as soon as this is done, head on to our website and check it out. So here's the deal. I know you're ready to get to the meat of the conversation. Everyone's on this call because they want to learn things or say things. But I did want to just make sure that we go over a couple pieces of housekeeping first. You will notice that all of you are muted and your cameras are turned off, and that's just because there are so many of us on the call. However, at any point during any of this discussion, if you have a question, please click on the little Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen over on the right-hand side. Not the chat button, but the Q&A. And Aaron will be monitoring that throughout the entire session. And he will make sure your question is asked to the correct person, and we'll get those things answered for you. After each speaker, we will have a Q&A session. And then at the very end of the call, we'll have an even bigger Q&A session. So lots of opportunities for your voices to be heard. And lastly, throughout the Trail Mixer today, we are going to be asking a few poll questions. So when you see those poll questions pop up, we encourage you to participate in them. Have a little fun with us. So with that, let's try our first poll question, if we could get that pulled up. This is a really good way for us to just get an understanding of who's on the call today. We want to know which describes you best. A, I have an e-bike. B, I have ridden an e-bike. C, I plan to try an e-bike one day. And D, I have no plans to ride an e-bike. So right now, it looks like a lot of you on the call have an e-bike. A lot of you have at least been on an e-bike. A couple of you plan to. And there's a few of you that have no plans to ride an e-bike at all. So we've got a really good representation across the spectrum of who's with us today and their relationship with e-bikes. So thanks for that. We'll go ahead and pull that down. So now I want to introduce again Susan. She is going to be leading you through and helping guide our conversation with all of our panelists today. So Susan, I'm going to turn this over to you.
All right, very good. Thank you so much, Beth. Thanks for that great introduction. And remember, we have 20 coupons for Cerberus beer, which is just waiting for you to join the organization. Well, let's talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. And I want to welcome our speakers and listeners one more time. You know, we hope you leave this forum with a better understanding of our city's e-bike project program. We have our pilot project that beginning Memorial Day. You're going to be reading a long time local e-rider who shares how e-bikes have made a big difference in his life. Delighted for you to hear about the city's program, and I'm delighted to have Fort Collins Moves join us tonight to explain some of the surprises during their e-bike pilot project that concluded just a year ago. Now, if you don't know, Fort Collins and Boulder have attained the status of platinum bike-friendly cities. They're the best of the best. TOSC has not taken a position on e-bikes on our urban and soft surface trails. We have said over and over again that trail safety for all of our users remains our top priority. This mixer, though, is for you to learn more about the topic and have all of your questions answered. Now, before we get to our first speaker, though, I think, you know, we've already done that. We've talked about that, if you support them, if you'd ride them. So let's get right now to Colorado Springs Regional Parks, Trails, and Open Space Manager, Scott Abbott, to explain the city's e-bike pilot project and what he hopes to learn over the next year. Welcome, Scott.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Scott Abbott, Regional Parks, Trails, and Open Space Manager for the City of Colorado Springs. Really appreciate the invite today. I know this is a hot topic, so I'm more than willing to hear all the questions and concerns tonight, you know, either during or after I go through our city's pilot program. So a little bit of background. We got into really discussing heavily e-bikes back in 2019, and even before that we knew that it was a growing technology, and even hearing rumblings of these type of bikes on our trail systems here. So that kind of spurned us, you know, to get with some sort of conversation regarding the technology that we know is coming, right? So in early 2018, we adopted our current policy, which since then we have allowed Class 1 e-bikes, if you're all familiar with the classes, to be ridden on our urban trail systems. We call those our Tier 1 and Tier 2 trails. Basically, those are the large hardened surface trails that run throughout our city. We can call them commuter trails, spine trails. This is our urban trail system. So since 2018, we've allowed the Class 1 bikes on those trails. Well, as the year progressed and we got into 2019 and into 2020, we started collecting a group of local stakeholders and having some meetings to talk about how do we continue our conversation locally. And we engaged those stakeholders in October of 2020. We gave them the opportunity to give us some input on the local feelings, the local emotions, the growing technology. We're seeing more and more of them show up on our trail systems. Then from that, we created a 2-week survey in November, and we got a great deal of feedback from that survey. About 1,660 participants in that survey. We got a lot of feedback through that. We had personal comments that we allowed people to do. And, you know, I went through 2,400 personally written comments about e-bikes. So we went through a great deal of research in attempting to create our pilot program that we're going to launch here in the Springs, Memorial Day, May 31 of this year. And what that's going to entail is, for our urban trail systems who had the Class 1 e-bikes allowed on them, we are going to increase that allowance to Class 2 e-bikes. So now on our urban trail system, both classes 1 and 2 will be allowed to move throughout the city on those trails. We are also going to allow Class 1 e-bikes only everywhere a bike can go. So if the traditional analog bike can go on a trail, so can a Class 1 pedal assist only bike travel in those corridors as well. One thing in our research, we understand that this technology is growing. We understand there is a myriad of manufacturers and different ways that e-bikes are put together. Something to remember, and we'll be paying close attention to that, is these e-bikes must have operable pedal systems. So I wanted to put that out there as well. Some of these pilot program areas, what is this pilot program going to look like? We have 3 basic categories inside this pilot program. We have the largest group of the program is going to be outreach and education. And that's really where our community is going to be able to work with us and help us spread the word, whether that's education, whether that's opportunities to teach people about trail etiquette and those philosophies. We have an opportunity to work with our city communications department and create PSAs and videos, all types of sign programs that are going to go around the city, whether they're small, movable yard signs. We are going to create interpretive panels at our trailheads that talk about what is allowable on specific properties and what is not. We're working on a frequently asked question handout that we can get into the hands of people if we're tabling throughout the year. We're also going to give those to our local bike shops so they can distribute, and they can become more educated on how to tell people what is allowed and not allowed, whether they're purchasing or renting e-bikes throughout this pilot program as well. And a real heavy lift from what's becoming very popular in our trail ambassadors programs, Trails and Open Space Coalition, Bicycle Colorado Springs, Medicine Wheel Trail Advocates. They're all creating these trail ambassador programs that will also allow us to reach and utilize that energy to get the word out on e-bikes in the Pikes Peak region. The next program area is our community feedback section. So we'll be creating city surveys that will be released throughout the pilot program, allow people to give us that feedback. Something similar that we've used with our Motorless Morning. Maybe these are QR codes that you can hit with your smartphone and answer a handful of questions. We'll be able to do some tabling exercises throughout the year at trailheads or along our popular trail systems. We can do on-site surveys right there and collect that feedback. So a myriad of opportunities for the public to give us some feedback on this pilot program. Something we're very interested in getting some data back. And the third part of our pilot program is our trail speeds data collection. We've created an extremely robust Excel spreadsheet. We've pinpointed some areas along our trail systems where we feel it's going to be really interesting to monitor what the speeds truly are on some of these trails, and whether that's a concrete trail like Cottonwood Creek Trail, whether that's some of our directional trails in our mountain bike areas, whether that's soft surface, flat, uphill, downhill. We have a number of different areas where we are going to take a Bushnell speed gun, something that you would see utilized for tracking speeds of kids throwing baseballs, or in this case, the speeds of bicycles traveling through our system. And we're going to collect. We really don't know what the speeds are out there. So that's going to be really interesting for us to collect and understand. Along with that, for our pilot program, we are going to instill a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. We want people to understand that It's not just about the individual during their opportunity to recreate, and they need to be careful. Certainly safety is forefront in our minds as well. So a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, and those will be posted and signed and stickered throughout the system as well. And so we're going to engage in that and then really look at that data at the end of the study, really get an idea of what our speeds are. Is it reasonable? Are we not being reasonable? So these are some things that we're going to study and take a look at. The last piece of our pilot program is commercial activity. And so we are not going to allow tours or commercial activity regarding e-bikes to be out on those single track backcountry soft surface trails within our park systems. Now we do allow and will allow tour companies and commercial activity to continue to utilize our urban trail systems, which they already do, but it's the programming that would be out on those single track trails that we're not going to allow during our pilot program. Boy, I really feel like I talked quickly there. But that's the extent of our program, and we're going to run it for a year, and we're going to collect all that data and see what we get at the end of that year. With that, I'll take any and all questions.
Scott, thank you so much. And we're going to have Aaron sort of share some of the questions that he's been getting in both the chat room and our Q&A. So we'll take some of those questions now. Thanks, Aaron.
Sounds good. All right, we got 3 questions so far. We'll start with the first one, a little bit of a longer question. The question is, how do rangers intend to identify an e-bike, make a distinction between class 1 and class 2, and identify if something has a throttle, particularly as e-mountain bikes are becoming visually indistinguishable from regular mountain bikes? Will they only react to instances that then attempt to identify from there, or will they be active in enforcement?
Well, enforcement we always end up at that word and term enforcement. And as our community knows, our park rangers cannot enforce any of our laws, ordinances, rules, and regulations with a hardened ticket. So it's always our philosophy is to educate first. We've done significant work inside my division to educate and continually look at how to identify e-bikes. But the person asking that question is exactly right. This technology is becoming smaller, more concealed, and it is interesting that you can be challenged with identifying an e-bike as it goes by you, or something you're seeing across the property on a trail over there. Now clearly, one of the best ways to identify a class 2 e-bike on soft surface trails is to witness it going uphill without the person pedaling. We could probably do a good job at saying that that's a class 2, but we try very hard to keep up with the trends. So you hear the term going down the rabbit hole. The internet and YouTube is a great resource to help us identify maybe some of the new technology out there that's coming, and it's going to be a challenge. So we're going to rely not only on our own education, but that's part of the feedback that we're going to get with the community. And so we're going to appreciate and collect all that.
Awesome. Another question that we have is, have you created metrics to measure against? How will we know if the pilot is successful or not?
A very good question. And a lot of times we think we're going to learn that along the way. Clearly, the number one really hardened data we're going to collect is speeds. That's very easy to collect a speed, write it down, and look at what context and where the location of those speeds were collected. So that's going to be very interesting. And I know we're going to learn a lot. We might even try to fine tune how we're collecting this data throughout the year. We do have a year to look at this, and we may hit some bumps and understand some hurdles that will pop up, but we're going to do our best to collect all this information and make informed decisions at the end of it.
Awesome. And let's see, we have a couple more questions I think we have time for. Another question that came in is, can the speed survey identify what type of bike?
Yeah, that's part of the education. So as we're out there, and we've already done some dry runs, and for what we're seeing now, it's fairly easy to identify the type of bike we're seeing. But as we know, as the technology is showing us, and depending on what, I mean, I did a quick search today, there's 200 easy manufacturers around the world of e-bikes, and not knowing where people are buying them from and where they're coming in at, it's going to be a challenge for us to keep up with educating ourselves on what we're seeing. So that is going to be one of those hurdles that I talked about.
All right, and the last question we'll answer during this session. This person said, I ride a full fat trike with assist. It has the potential for being an E. However, I haven't used it, so I don't know the speed. Is there consideration for people that use ADA that allows them to be able to be given consideration for this?
I'm not confident on the question. It's a trike that has the capability to be an e-assist bike. However, that technology hasn't been utilized yet on that specific piece of equipment. And, you know, of course, through our urban trail systems, they have every ability to accommodate that style of bike, being a class 1 or class 2 style, whether it's 2-wheel or 3-wheel, that is absolutely okay during this pilot program.
All right, and let's see, we had one more just sneak in here. What are you expecting in terms of carrying capacity on some of the trails, and how do you determine carrying capacity?
At this time, we don't have a formula for carrying capacity. It's something that's consistently talked about, but we don't have the right formula locally. Certainly COVID and the situation last year pushes us more and more to create some sort of ideas around studying that. But our park systems and our trails are for people to use. Creating a carry capacity on some of those urban trail systems would be extremely difficult in order to control the amount of people that are out there. It's a double-edged sword. It's a beautiful thing that the global pandemic has created opportunities for people to come outside of their houses and try new things and be out. That's our business. We love to provide that. But we do know that we have some challenges with capacity, not only along trail systems or single track trail areas, but in our parks as a whole. The traffic situations in some of our parks that hold city roads that run through them, that's a huge challenge as well. So these are things that we're going to be looking forward to studying in the future.
Scott, thank you
Thanks,
very
Scott.
much. That was a great overview. And thank you, Aaron, for those questions. And for those of you that did not get your questions answered, Scott, if you don't mind hanging around for a little bit, we'll get to a few more at the very end.
I'm
But
here for the
thank you.
duration. Yep.
And I would again encourage people to join Thursday's Park Advisory Board meeting. I know you have a PowerPoint. I've already looked at it. And you'll be presenting then to the meeting, to the group at 7:30 in the morning. You'll find information on the city's website, and make that link and see his presentation. So again, Scott, thanks so much.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's go to our poll question number 2. We are curious on how you stand on the issue of e-bikes. So if you would answer the one of these that most reflects your opinion: I support e-bikes on paved and soft surface trails. I support e-bikes on paved trails, but not soft surface trails. I do not support e-bikes on any trails, or I guess we have an other category too. So which of those reflects? And it looks like the majority of our folks that are weighing in do support e-bikes on paved and soft surface trails. So that's very interesting. And we're really grateful that you are weighing in on this. So we'll take another second or two to get a few more answers. So it looks that generally, yes, e-bikes, with the majority on both, and then a smaller number on paved but not soft surface. So thank you very much. All right, let's move along then. Thank you. Our next presenter is Kent Drummond. Kent is not only an avid e-bike rider, but he's also a member of the longest running hiking club in the Pikes Peak region. Started in 1903, the Saturday Nights Club, as a hiker and a cyclist, He brings a unique perspective to this conversation. Now, I'm not saying Kent joined the Saturday Night Club in 1903. No, he did not, but he has been a member for some time. And we're really grateful to have you with us today, Kent, and spend a few minutes talking and sharing why you use an e-bike and the value you find in them. Go ahead, Kent.
All right, thank you. Considered a panelist on this program. I've been trying to insinuate myself into the works here for some time, and this is a good way to do it. Colorado native. I probably started mountain biking, such as it was, around 32 years ago when my oldest son graduated from high school, and have been an active cyclist all that time. I've been a hiker, backpacker, mountain climber, and so on as all my life, and a skier as well. Before we, well, let me back up a little bit. I spent most of my working career in Wyoming and riding bikes up there. But when we had an opportunity to move back to Colorado 13 years ago, my wife thought it might be a good idea because e-bikes were becoming known at that time. And coming down here, we knew we were going to live in the mountains, where we live up in Divide. And she read an article about an e-bike that looked like it might be the kind of thing that would enable her to be able to get back into bicycle riding again. She's suffered through breast cancer, broken neck, bad hips, whatever physical disabilities there might be. And a bicycle of this type was an opportunity that we chose to explore, which we did. And we got an e-bike for her. This enabled her to ride along with myself and my son and my grandchildren when we go out on family rides. And about a year after she got her bike, I had an opportunity to ride a fat tire e-bike. And so I thought this might be kind of fun. I gave it a try, and it was really kind of fun. Because the trails around here have a lot of up to them, and riding a traditional bike can be fairly exhausting after a while. But with the little bit of assistance that an e-bike provides, it makes it possible to go out and go for a very enjoyable ride with, as I say, a little bit of assistance. Along with that, and my enthusiasm and so on, a good friend of mine by the name of John Murphy, who has been struggling with battling cancer for about 10 years now, and was kind of restricted from being able to hike with us Saturday nights. He's a longtime member. I mentioned to him that I was going to get an e-bike, and he said, well, yeah, I've been thinking about that too. I think I would like to get one. So we ordered our e-bikes at the same time and have been riding together for the last 3 years quite often. And John goes out frequently by himself, and he does 20 and 30-mile rides now, thanks to the ability that he's obtained through his e-bike. My enthusiasm has spread a little bit. I've gotten at least 12, maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 or 15 friends to acquire e-bikes. And I try to organize a ride down in the Colorado Springs area on the urban trails, because Colorado Springs has done an amazing job of building these trails, and the plans to build more trails are very exciting, because I'm looking forward to the ability to take some really long rides all around the city and loop tours, and not just in and out. So the neat thing about an e-bike is, if you are, everybody grew up with a bicycle at some point, and for people as we age, and I put myself in the aging athlete category, I think I do reasonably well. I hike an average of 800 miles a year, and try to knock out a couple of mountains each summer. I have completed all of the 14ers. So I'm still kicking out there, but the neat thing about an e-bike is that it allows you to exercise at whatever level of output that you want to generate. When I go down to the Springs to ride on our, what I call urban rides, I try to ride as much of that outing as I can with no pedal assistance. So I'm basically using my bike as a traditional bike. But when we get to a long uphill stretch, such as the Cottonwood Creek Trail, for those of you that are familiar with it, going from the Pikes Peak Greenway heading east, there's a long uphill stretch there, and it's nice to have that little bit of assistance. So you regulate the amount of assistance that you want to achieve while still getting a reasonable workout. So that's, in my opinion, the advantage of an e-bike. People get very upset. Oh dear, they go 20 miles an hour. Well, yeah, they're capable of going 20 miles an hour. Corvettes and Porsches can go 150 miles an hour, but they don't drive that fast. And my statistics on my rides generally show that the average speed that we do when we go for an e-bike ride down the Springs is somewhere between 7 and 9 miles an hour. And I have to tell you that we are being constantly blown off the trail by the road bikers that are going well in excess of those speeds. So it'll be interesting to see how Scott's speed gun analysis comes out, what sort of statistics come from that. And I would like to go on record here as volunteering to help Scott in any way that I can with the program here and gathering statistics, what have you, with regard to the pilot project. So it's exciting that the city is now allowing Class 2 e-bikes to be on the urban trails. My particular bike happens to be a Class 1. And the again, the concern about bikes that have throttles, I don't think you would see an e-biker using just the throttle alone very often. It might happen. There are people on the highway that go fast and weave in and out. So if you're going to be a jerk, you don't need an e-bike to do that. You can do that just as easily on a regular bike. So the thing about, in the case of my wife, I'll use her as an example again, she pedals her bike all the time. She uses the throttle on occasion when she needs just a little bit of assistance. And I think that's the way most of the people that I know who have Class 2 e-bikes use theirs as well. They use the throttle only when they need a little assistance, maybe crossing the street, maybe a short uphill to get them over that obstacle so that they don't have to shift gears or whatever that might be. But for the most part, the Class 2 riders are out there to get exercise and fresh air or what have you. So I don't see the Class 2 e-bikes as being a problem. It comes right down to it. If we do our job with the signage and so forth, and we establish a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, which I think is going to annoy a lot of the road bikers because they like to go much faster than that, based on my observations. But if the speed limits are enforced, then as far as I'm concerned, why not allow Class 3 e-bikes? If the speed limit is 15 miles an hour, it doesn't matter that they're capable of going 28 miles an hour assisted. They're limited to 15 miles an hour. So what's the big deal? So that's the urban trails. And I would, I don't want to get into the soft surface trails. I want to wait until we find out how the pilot project went up in Fort Collins area from our next panelist. But I would like to say the reason that I got a Class 1 e-bike specifically was that I knew there were going to be experiments with the Forest Service, for instance, of allowing Class 1 e-bikes. And I wanted to make sure that I had one that would enable me to try to ride some of these soft surface trails when the permission was granted. And as far as not allowing Class 2 e-bikes, the only thing that a person on a Class 2 e-bike has to do to make it a Class 1 e-bike is unplug the connection to the throttle. And suddenly he's got a Class 1 e-bike and he should be allowed to ride on those soft surface trails as well. So that's kind of my 2 cents. I'm still an avid hiker. I enjoy riding my e-bike. It's a lot of fun. I have had it for about 2.5 years, and I've logged 3,500 miles on the bike so far. So I guess that does make me an avid e-bike rider. Yeah, so that's that's pretty much my my bit here. I'm enjoying having people ride with me, and I will continue to organize rides when the weather improves. We got another 4 inches of snow up here today, so maybe we'll have some nice weather here in June or July.
And thank you so much. 3,000 miles, impressive. Well, I appreciate your comments, your stories. And now I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. And Aaron, do we have a few questions?
We have one question so far. We've had several people thanking you, Kent, for all your insight. So that one question that came through so far is, Kent, what do you say to those who worry trails will become more crowded with e-bikes?
I say that e-bikes are not the problem. Cycling in general is going to be the problem. Yes, there will probably be more people on the trails thanks to e-bikes, but it's a general growth in the sport of cycling all over. The analogy that I use is when I was a little boy, my mother told me that to drive between Denver and Colorado Springs was a dirt road. As I got a little bit older, the road between Denver and Colorado Springs was Highway 85. South out through Inglewood is a 2-lane highway, 1 lane in each direction. If you were to drive between Denver and Colorado Springs today, we're looking at 3 and 4 lines in each direction. Why? Because there's more traffic on the road. So e-bikes aren't the problem on the trails. It's a growth in the activity, in the sport, and there are just plain more cycles on the road. You can't go to a bicycle shop anywhere in the country today and buy a new bicycle, whether it be traditional or e-bike, because there is a shortage. Is that, I think that covers it.
I think so too. So far, that is the only questions that we have. So if we get any more for you, we'll ask at the end.
Sounds good. Again, thanks, Kent. That was great. It's great to have you involved. Alrighty, before we go on to our next speaker, let's take our poll number 3. And that is this. Your biggest concern about e-bikes, please share that with us. Is it that e-bikes will make our trails more crowded? Is it that it will make our trails less safe? Is it that e-bikes will cause more damage to our trails? Is it all of the above, or is it none of the above? So once again, what is your biggest concern about e-bikes? And so far, overwhelmingly, it's none of the above. But if there was one concern, it is that it will make our trails less safe. And that's at about 23, 24% of the respondents, goes back and forth. But generally speaking, this is a fairly positive group that does not have a concern about e-bikes. So thank you so much for your answers. Appreciate that. Okay, we're going to go on now to our final speaker, and that is Nick Hyman, who works in Fort Collins Move Department. I love it that you have a Move Department. That is just fantastic. And you're a specialist in the Active Modes Division. Now, his team set up an e-bike pilot in April of 2019, and you're going to be sharing some of the surprising results of your pilot, how the data has been used, and now that e-bikes are allowed on urban trails, how is that going? And what is the future for e-bikes on soft surface trails? Whatever you can share about that. So Nick, we all look forward to your comments, and welcome and thank you.
Great, thanks, Susan. I hope that y'all can see my screen.
We can.
Okay, excellent. Great. Well, as Susan said, my name is Nick Hyman. I'm a specialist in our Active Modes program in our transportation planning department called FC Moves. And yes, aptly named, I think that we appreciate mobility in many forms, but certainly aim to improve alternative, active, and sustainable modes of transportation across the community. I've got quite a few slides here. We might fly through some of them. A lot, I think, are relatively technical, but I wanted to make sure that that technical content was still included. So we began with our pilot program asking our city council for 2 specific amendments to ordinances. Those included changes to our city code specifically. You can see that in section 23. allowing Class 1 and Class 2 electrical assist bicycles on paved designated trails within natural areas and recreation areas unless prohibited by signs. So we can talk a little bit about that. The second ask was to update, make an amendment to our traffic code, chapter 21, which deals specifically with regulations around bicycles. But just for reference, we were looking for and trying to make ordinances, which ultimately did pass, to two separate pieces of our code in order to make that official. So we also wanted to kind of set the stage in terms of what we were talking about with definitions around e-bikes. So of course, e-bikes, a bicycle with 2 or 3 wheels, fully operable pedals, and an electric assist motor. And we were interested in piloting e-bikes, Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes on our paved trails. Of course, Class 1 e-bikes provide electrical assist only while the rider is pedaling up to 20 miles an hour, and Class 2 e-bikes provide electrical assist regardless if the rider is pedaling or not, but also maxing out at 20 miles an hour. Of course, many of you may be familiar with some of the background. In 2017, the a new state law defined e-bikes as bicycles rather than toy devices, and allows Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes on trails unless restricted by a local jurisdiction. And this was really important because Fort Collins already had an ordinance in place restricting electric assist bicycles and quote unquote toy devices from being used on our trails. So the state law basically created a patchwork of regulations kind of across the state, and we were interested in trying to align closer with the state. In 2018 and into 2019, city boards recommended a pilot program, specifically our transportation board and our bicycle advisory committee recommended a pilot to allow e-bikes on paved trails. And then in 2019, we actually approved our 1-year pilot program. That concluded April 30th with, again, an ask to council to update those two specific pieces to our municipal and our traffic code. And what we, in order to kind of bolster our argument, we came prepared with education and evaluation frameworks that we had deployed within the community that took an account of public perceptions, safety and trail experience, bicycle utilization, and perceptions on trail laws and trail etiquette of real users. We also wanted to make sure that our pilot program included a robust representation of other internal and external stakeholders. From an internal perspective, we wanted input from our natural areas department, park planning and development, who actually manages, plans, builds, and then maintains our trail system, which is separate from our on-street bikeway system. Our parks department, us and FC Moves, and of course, police services with some of the concerns around safety and safe behavior, and in particular, the concept around enforcement. Some of our external stakeholders included bicycle organizations, bicycle retailers, Colorado State University, the Colorado School of Public Health, and some regional partners as well. A lot of our, in particular, the Colorado School of Public Health played a really instrumental role in the overall design of our pilot program evaluation framework. And we were incredibly thankful to have some additional support in designing our evaluation. So education, Scott mentioned education as kind of a primary mode of changing behavior, and we tend to agree. We wanted to make sure that we were providing opportunities for people to weigh in, to collect information, as well as also providing additional educational information to either stymie or improve trail etiquette conditions. We included trail signage. We included pop-ups where we actually popped up tents, staffed those with staff from our department as well as park rangers. We included outreach at major events. We had a bike bell giveaway program where we affixed some information to a tag on the bell and handed those out to community members. Handouts, of course, websites, social media, and press releases. We also offered e-bike demos. This is what the picture on the right is a demo with community members to actually get them on e-bikes, considering that many of our community members hadn't actually been on an e-bike to begin with. And then also partner outreach. In terms of assessing safety, use, and public perspectives, we used a variety of different methods to collect this data. Surveys, we included a trail intercept survey. We had surveys that we distributed at some of our major events, and we also had an online survey. We also collected speed data using portable radar units to assess speeds during several points in time throughout the course of the pilot program. Observations and counts, we wanted to count bicycle usership on our trail system at different locations throughout the city, and also just kind of put eyes and observe behaviors. Where are those conflicts that we were hearing might be of concern? We also wanted to take an account of reported conflicts. So if someone actually did dial 911 to report some type of conflict. General comments that we received through anecdotally, but also through some of our online forums. Feedback from partners and other departments. And in total, we collected over 1,100 responses to our surveys, which is pretty impressive. So this particular slide shows the varying levels of support and in some cases opposition to different types of e-bikes. We asked specifically whether or not the community was supportive of Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes. You can tell, and perhaps not surprising, that Class 1 e-bikes had a majority support with 53% of respondents agreeing that they supported Class 1 e-bikes. That dropped down to 36% for Class 2 e-bikes. We can also see a substantial portion of neutral responses in both of those. So the opposition in the blue frames, 15% of survey respondents opposed Class 1 e-bikes on our paved multi-use trails, and 28%, an increase to 28%, opposed Class 2 e-bikes on our paved multi-use trails. So some common themes that we began to identify that in terms of support, there was a lot of support from those needing aid or the assist that comes with an electric assist bicycle. That there were that they also provided a method for alternative transportation as well. In terms of some of the common themes of those opposed were, of course, speed concerns, the fact that they're motorized vehicles, where we had before explicitly prohibited motorized vehicles from using our trail system, safety concerns, and concerns that there would be a disruption in the trail experience. So here's where we start to get into some of the interesting data. So from our trail counts, we conducted trail counts on multiple occasions, including in September, when there's a national effort to document and collect data related to people riding bicycles and walking. We saw just 1.15% of bicyclists were e-bikes, just over 1%, which is pretty interesting considering a lot of the concerns that we were hearing. We also collected information from bike shops. We didn't collect specific sales numbers, but anecdotally, bike shops did tell us that there was an increase in sales, and that was mostly among Class 1 e-bikes. From our surveys, we found that most e-bike owners tend to be older adults, age 50 plus, and that the next most prominent group were those 30 to 49. So I think that was an interesting piece of information to start to look at, especially when we were hearing about potential concerns of young people, younger adults misusing e-bikes. We found that most e-bike users, at least those among those surveyed, tend to be older adults. And we also found that bicycle use was increasing and in fact replacing car trips when adults, especially older adults, had access to an e-bike. So certainly some interesting results from our surveys. Speed, this was another interesting finding. So we observed over 1,100 bicycles over the course of the pilot period, and we found that of all bicyclists, the average speed was just about 12 miles an hour. Our courtesy speed limit on all of our paved multi-use trails is 15 miles an hour. So we were well under the courtesy speed limit for all bicyclists observed, and we saw a range of 1 to 24 miles an hour. With e-bikes, we saw and observed just 16 e-bikes, and their average speed was just over that courtesy speed limit, a little over 15.5 miles per hour. But the range was from 10 to 23. So we did see that the highest speed was from those riding conventional bicycles rather than those using electric assist bicycles. This particular slide was developed in April 2020, right before we went to council with the ask to update our traffic and city codes. But to my knowledge, this is still accurate, that there have been no safety incidents with e-bike crashes reported to park rangers or police. Though there's been some negative experiences reported through Access Fort Collins or via email, generally speaking, the experience has been overwhelmingly positive. And that our trail survey respondents reported minimal conflicts. Overall, again, a high perception of trail safety. With our trail surveys, this was an intercept survey. Nearly all respondents rated the quality of the experience on trails a 4 or a 5, using a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being a poor experience, 5 being the best. And that there were very few respondents that rated negative encounters with e-bikes. That the specific question was, if you've encountered an e-bike, rate the experience from negative to positive. And there were very few negative interactions with e-bikes. And most respondents never or rarely actually even saw an e-bike behaving in an unsafe behavior or engaging in discourtesy. We did conduct a literature review with Boulder County to determine what some of the uses for bicycle or e-bike use were within different surveyed populations or different populations that had been studied. And I certainly appreciate Ken's perceptions on this too, because we tend to agree that it provides access, particularly the differently abled community members and older adults, giving them a different level of access to recreation as well as sustainable or alternative transportation. It can also be encouraging to use an e-bike. There's certainly some health benefits, decreased risk of safety concerns when there's greater numbers of people riding bicycles. And of course, looked at other jurisdictions and how some of that was comparable across jurisdictions. This is just of note too, I guess, again, another more kind of technical piece, but we did take the proposal to several boards and commissions. I think it's worth noting that the boards and commissions on the left recommended allowing Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes on paved trails, whereas the commissions and boards on the right preferred to or recommended to only allow Class 1 e-bikes. The Commission on Disability and the Air Quality Advisory Board did not have an opportunity to either take action or their meeting was canceled. So I think I ought to touch a little bit on this too. Scott fielded a question about how do park rangers distinguish between e-bikes and conventional bikes, and that can be difficult, but we are working with our police officers as well as our park rangers to identify the differences between conventional and e-bikes so that it is easier to understand what we're actually seeing out there. Let's see, we certainly were very interested in ensuring that Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes were the only ones considered, though as part of our pilot, considering Class 3 e-bikes have a much greater potential for maximum speed. So the future, where are we going after this pilot program? There's several concerns and challenges that come to mind. The first is with other e-devices. I'm not sure, and I'm not familiar with what Colorado Springs has done around e-scooters as well as bike share, but we are about to roll out a new vendor for bike share and scooter share. All of those devices will be electric. And so there have been questions about how do we kind of rectify the need or the desire among our community to use our trail system as a commuting type of system rather than just purely recreation. There's of course the question about enforcement and how does that happen? Very similarly here, our park rangers are not deputized, meaning that they're not allowed to actually pursue someone that has been accused of violating the traffic or the municipal code. So we really have to take this approach with education rather than enforcement unless something is happening on our street network. The future of our trail system is also continuing to change. We've just rolled out a couple new paved trails that connect to Loveland, and shortly with completed work with I-25 from Denver north to Fort Collins, we'll actually have the opportunity to extend our Poudre River Trail, which will connect from LaPorte, Colorado up against the foothills all the way to Greeley, Colorado, which will create a network of nearly 40 miles of continuous paved trails between those two communities. Trail safety, again, that hasn't been a major concern, but we do anticipate an increase in e-bikes on our trail system as the cost for e-bikes begins to drop and they become more accessible for people at different price points. And then also how are marginalized populations accounted for in our pilot program and with this ordinance too, knowing that cost is certainly a barrier to entry for many of our marginalized and typically low income populations, and realizing that there are some major benefits to using an e-bike, such as improved access to recreation and transportation opportunities. So how can we create additional programming to support our historically marginalized populations? So with that, got through that pretty quickly, but I am more than happy to address any questions that have come up, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Nick, that was fantastic. There was so much great information there. I think we could listen to you for another half hour because I can think of 10 questions that I have, but nonetheless, let's turn it over to Aaron. And Aaron, do you want to give provide a couple of questions for Nick? And then we've got 2 more very short speakers, and then we'll ask a few more questions, but hold in there and thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have 2 quick questions for you, Nick. The first one that came up was, why did your city council approve the pilot program versus just running the pilot program without council approval?
So I think this is a really key point that I push for a lot, which is that context is key to any community. So I think our community is very resistant to taking, say, what Boulder has done and saying that that's going to apply well in Fort Collins. And I think this pilot was no exception, where we wanted to demonstrate whether or not for ourselves that this was actually going to work, and give us the opportunity to kind of bail by creating a 1-year pilot if we did see that there were major safety concerns, increase in crashes, unmanageable congestion on our trail system, none of which we actually realized, which all added additional credence to the ask that we were pursuing.
All right, and the next question we have is, who is the average e-bike user in Fort Collins? Is it college students? And also, are the electric scooters allowed on your trails in Fort Collins?
I would say that the average user, I could go back in and probably pull some of our data. It's hard to assume age when we're not conducting an intercept survey. But I would say that by and large, the average user is an older adult, not college students. I think that the price barrier is really at play when we start talking about those in our community. Generally, this is a very broad brush to paint with, but that the price point is just not accessible for, generally speaking, those younger than 25. E-scooters are not allowed on our trail system. And I think that's something that we'd like to take a little bit closer look at, but also want a robust community engagement process to inform the future direction of other e-devices on our trails.
Awesome. And one last question. Are e-bikes allowed on non-urban trails in Fort Collins?
That's a great point, and I meant to touch on that. No, we do not allow class 1 or 2 e-bikes, or class 3 for that matter, on any of our non-paved trails. So that was a really important conversation within our community, and something we heard loud and clear from our community was that we wanted to make sure that our single track trails and those trails that are unpaved in our natural areas and in the foothills were not accessible to people on e-bikes, and that those were, I think, largely to manage congestion and manage safety concerns. Wanted to make sure that those were relegated to mountain bikers using conventional mountain bikes and people on foot.
Thank you, Nick. That's all the questions we have for you.
Great, thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much. Hang in there, Nick. There might be another question or 2, but right now I'd like to introduce Jolie Nesmith of Pike Ride to share what's new this spring with Pike Ride, which uses all e-bikes. Correct, Jolie? That's a cute dog. Jolie, can you unmute? Hello, Jolie.
We're good now.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Sorry for that delay, Susan.
No worries.
Hey, I'm really stoked that you guys invited us or myself to be a part of this and the whole e-bike conversation. You know, we launched here in 2018 with our e-bike share program, and we're relatively new to this community and just a new space. And I think we've seen, well, we didn't launch with e-bikes in 2018. We launched with pedal bikes in 2018. So let me clarify that message. But I would say the biggest thing is for us in 2019, when we transitioned to all the e-bikes, is that we saw over 120% increase in our ridership. And for us, that's huge. I mean, it is not just that we're now replacing car rides, but also the diversity in our ridership, since we now have e-bikes, is huge. I mean, we have everybody from, so we launched a partnership with Springs Rescue Mission down in, near Fountain, but they are now using our bikes to get groceries and to go to Walmart instead of 7-Eleven, which gives people another additional means of mobility. But also we have people that are now riding our bikes because they have they're accessible. So our pedal bikes were hard, not just for tourists, but for locals. And we have locals now that are using our bikes that maybe we have a specific person in mind right now who is a big proponent of Pike Ride, but he's a We Ride member, and he has not been able to ride a bike for the past 10 years of his life because he lost his leg as a veteran, and just has had a lot of dilemmas in his life that kept him from being able to ride a bike, but now he can because of the e-assist. So I mean, Pike Ride, we are all class 1. All the bikes we have out there in the field are class 1 e-bikes, which means that for the average size adult with our sensor on our bike, means that the average size adult, who knows what average is at this point in time, but the average size adult can go up to 15 miles per hour. Our bikes do not go beyond that. If you're on a downhill incline, maybe from the incline to Manitou, perhaps because you're gonna have gravity going with you, but our bikes will not support anybody over 15 miles an hour. I mean, it legit cuts off. If you've never ridden one, you can feel it when it turns off and it hits 15 miles per hour. I would also just say that, last year we were hugely successful during the pandemic. I mean, we supported more than 50% of our rides for free in the city of Colorado Springs, and just, I think that allowed a number of people to realize the benefits of an e-bike as well. And then, I mean, now in 2021, we are like a missile going off into space is what it feels like for myself, but we are projected to double not just our hub density, but also our service area. So we'll be in Manitou, I would say, in the next 30 to 45 days, but that also means we have an opportunity to provide more hubs within our current operating area, which we will provide more than 20 of those in the next, I would say, in the next 90 to 120 days before the year's over. So we are expanding greatly, and we wouldn't be doing that if there wasn't a need or a desire for that in our community. I love hearing from Fort Collins. Like Nick, I really enjoy hearing from other cities and what they're doing and how this has impacted their space. But we're on a projectile to continue increasing and providing more opportunities for people in our community. So thanks for the opportunity. And that's us, Susan, in a nutshell.
Jolie, thank you. Exciting that you're doing so well. And, someone that hasn't taken a turn on one of your bikes, get out there, rent one for an hour and do it and enjoy it. All right, our last speaker tonight is Cully, and Cully is with Bike Colorado Springs. And we're really glad, Cully, that you can join us and kind of explain what Bike Colorado Springs is doing with the Bike Pilot program in helping, I think, with some educational components. So Cully Radvilas, can you speak with us?
Sure. Thanks, Susan. So as Susan said, I'm Cully. I'm the communication chair for Bike Colorado Springs. We're a bike advocacy organization representing bicyclist interests throughout the Pikes Peak region. And as Susan said, we are going to help with some of the education aspects of this e-bike pilot with our new bicycle ambassador program. So this Bicycle Ambassador Program is a program that we launched last year with volunteers throughout the community, helping at different events throughout the region, mostly interacting with businesses as well as helping at events such as Motorless Morning. So I wanted to give you a little background on kind of why we think e-bikes, what role they play in bicycling in our region. And Bike Colorado Springs is all about making bike riding more accessible and more enjoyable for a wider range of people. We think e-bikes are part of the equation as they are efficient, cost-effective, and a fun way to travel. And it's been shown to change transportation habits. I myself have picked up my first pedal assist bike in August to haul my son around to and from daycare. Look up the Urban Arrow family. If you don't know what that is, it's a large cargo bike that's somewhat equivalent to a minivan and has helped me log over 1,100 miles since August, nearly all of which would have otherwise been car trips. National data shows that there's a large percentage of current vehicle trips that are well within the range of an average bicycle rider, with 45% of vehicle trips 3 miles or less, and trips over 6 miles accounting for 40% of all trips. While these trips under 3 miles are doable by many bike riders, these distances are even that much more reasonable for people using an e-bike. This is especially true in our city, which, as you know, has some challenging topography. E-bikes remove that barrier, as can be seen with the growth and success of Pike Ride ever since they introduced e-bikes to their fleet. E-bikes make it possible to travel longer distances in less time, making e-bikes a great solution for the sprawling nature of our city with fairly large distances between destinations. It's been shown that e-bike riders ride more frequently, which is one of our goals at Bike Colorado Springs. E-bikes remove barriers, making bike riding more attractive so more people do it. E-bikes provide an opportunity for people of widely varying fitness levels and ages to enjoy our city's amazing trail network. Simply stated, e-bikes equal more butts on bikes. And we believe that this position aligns with our mission, making bike riding better in the Pikes Peak region for people of all ages and abilities. So that's just kind of a quick rundown of what Bike Colorado Springs is and what we believe and what I personally believe related to e-bikes. We're happy to talk more, and if anybody would like to get involved with the Bike Ambassador Program, we're happy to have you join, and we can give you more information.
Thanks, Kelly. That's awesome. We appreciate you taking time to be on with us tonight. We appreciate all of our guest speakers for coming on tonight, and Susan, for you coordinating this great conversation for us. So we do have, I think, a few questions that kind of came in at the end, which we'll get to. But before I do want to thank our members that joined the call tonight. It is because of you that we can do the work we can do. And as a final reminder, Cerberus has 20 pint tokens that they're willing to give to anyone that becomes a member in the next 24 hours from this call. So go do that. Aaron, do we have any final questions that I think we have, we can probably, we're a little over time, but I think we can take one or two if there are some pressing questions that haven't been answered by our panelists yet.
Yes, we can have a couple more questions for Scott Abbott to answer. So Scott, are you still on?
I'm still here.
Awesome. All right, so let's see, I got 3 questions for you to finish on, and that'll be it for tonight. So the first one is, with e-bikes, do you envision any education with bike shops?
Absolutely. And man, I wish I would be able to have more times to go hang out in bike shops. I enjoy that thoroughly. But certainly they'll be the recipients of our FAQ handouts. I think the sky's the limit on opportunities to do a kind of a group of interested bike shop owners to get together and discuss this. And any way that we can make our message clearer to those selling and renting, that would be a huge benefit. So we are open to that, and we'll work towards that end as well.
Awesome. Another question that we have is, does Colorado Springs Parks bike speed limits apply to single direction downhill bike only trails?
No.
All right. Another question we got was, TOPS properties ban all motorized vehicles. How do you justify e-bikes on TOPS property?
At this time, it's our stance, and we're following the federal government's guidelines through their Consumer Products Safety Commission, and they do not recognize Class 1 and Class 2 electric assist bicycles as motorized vehicles. So at this time, that's in our legal department downtown. They're going to give us a legal opinion on that. That's the stance we're going to use as it relates to motorized vehicle prohibition, as we've seen in the past. But this is new technology, and we're going to lean into the feds and adopt their definitions.
Awesome. And we got one more question, and that'll be it. It is, e-bike sales and use will grow exponentially locally and nationally, regardless of the results of the pilot program. So if the results of the pilot program lead to policies that restrict e-bikes from urban trails, where would the city suggest that e-bikers ride? In traffic lanes and on-road bike lanes, anywhere else?
I think it's too early to answer that question. It's a great question. It's a well thought out question. We know the technology's here. We're going to do our best at looking at our year of this type of allowance, and at the end of that, collect that data and move forward. But we're just not there yet.
All right. Yeah, those are all the questions that we got.
Wonderful. I do see that we had a few questions straggling in. So for those of you, if you feel you didn't get your questions answered, we will be providing an email at the end of this. And if we found that there are any questions that we just weren't able to get to, we will be sure to answer that in the email that we send to all participants here. And also, we would be happy to connect you to any of our panelists if you feel like you need more information. So once again, thank you to the entire TOSC staff for helping put this together. A huge thank you to all of our panelists for taking time out of their day to talk about this and answer so many of our questions. And on behalf of TOSC staff, I want to wish you all a happy spring, even though it doesn't quite feel like it. So let's bring up TOSC, and we'll all bid you farewell for now and hope we will see you out on the trails, maybe when they're not so snowy.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.